All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Golfers Anonymous podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Noah, and if this is your first time joining us on the show, first of all, welcome. But I'll give you a quick intro into what we typically do here on the show. I bring on a different guest every single week who is some kind of golf sicko, right? So they have found golf one way or another and just become absolutely addicted to this game, like so many of us are. And the reason I started the show is that I found when I went to a wedding, a bar, any kind of gathering, and I found one person that played golf, automatically we had endless things to talk about, endless things in common. You had a friend for the night, potentially someone you could play golf with in the future, maybe a friend, who knows what. Golf is just this, binding force where it really just brings you to really cool people. So I just wanted to essentially start interviewing people I know that play golf and have some association of golf, worked in golf, anything, could be anything. So this week, our guest is Jed Moller. Typically how I have folks introduce themselves on the show is we'll go your name, how long you've been playing golf, and then your current handicap.
So good question. Yeah. So Jed Moller, great job on the pronunciation. Most people don't get that. Nailed it. I've played golf my entire life. And one, thank you for having me on. Two, it was great for you to reach out. And I was like, man, like, what do I do that, would even be worth talking about? Then I found out your angle is golf sickos. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Like I got that piece covered. Literally grew up playing my entire life. My stock answer is I don't remember a time that I didn't play golf. So I hit balls in the backyard. My dad played golf. My grandfather played golf. My older brother played golf. And so I was in it from the beginning. I think the story goes, I had to prove that I could hit the ball well enough to go to the first junior clinic. And I think that was 6. So I've always hit balls. I think 6 was when I first went to my first junior clinic, and I had a 5-iron and a 9-iron and a putter, and that's all I had.
And then last part of that is, what is the current handicap index?
Yeah, that piece hurts because we'll be transparent. I'm at a 4.1 right now. It's been a tough year, Noah. Hasn't been a great year. I took a lesson in January. Maybe not the best decision because it went the other way. But I usually was hovering around like a 2. But we're working on it. We're getting back on track. Perfect. Right before the snow hits. It's a great time to start finding your game.
Hey man, sometimes the winter comes at a convenient time. Sometimes you just need that extended break, extended time away from the clubs, just completely reset, and then you come back and you play some good golf.
In general, I would agree. Except like literally the thing that I've been practicing like all summer is now starting to click. And I did this thing that's called like getting clubs like fit for you, which I never did for like 20 years. And apparently that really helps. So I have a new driver and it's October 29th, which isn't going to do me a lot of good for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, so I'm hoping to squeeze out a few more weeks before the winter comes.
I mean, hey man, at this rate, for listeners that aren't currently in New England, it's been a weird fall. Like it's either 75 and sunny or it's like 50 and cloudy. So at this rate, we might get a string of pretty good golf through like an extended fall. Hopefully we're still playing well past maybe a couple weeks past Thanksgiving. So Jed, typically how I have folks start off is you hit a little bit about how you first got into the game, your whole family played. You picked up clubs at 6, went to a junior clinic, all that. But when would you say you really got the golf bug, right? Because, picking up a club is one thing, but then becoming a full-on, golf sicko is kind of another level.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when people ask what I do, obviously I have a full-time job that pays bills, but golf has always been there. Like it's always been part of, I guess, who my identity and who I am. And not being a good player, it's just like golf's always around, except for a couple of years where I gave it up. But I grew up in New Hampshire. They had an awesome junior program in the summer where you got to travel. It was so cheap. It was like $10 or something. You could go play all these different courses and compete. So I think I peaked when I was like 8. I might have been like the
Okay.
best in terms of like the landscape of golf. I only got worse after that. But yeah, I was playing junior golf events very early, and then played in high school, played in college, and then did some stuff for a couple of years after. So like when I get the golf bug, I mean, I guess I've never not had it, to be honest. Like it's always been there.
Gotcha. So you played in high school, played in college. What was that, college experience like for you?
Hmm. I should, yeah. So technically, I played in college. We were terrible. We were terrible. It's fun. They, I picked my college. Like I remember my dad being like, "Don't you want to go somewhere with like a great football team or something?" Because I loved all sports growing up. I was like, "Nah, I want to play golf." So went to school in Connecticut, and you know playing in the Northeast is a lot different than going down south. So I was able to play all 4 years. I mean, we did not do well, but the experience and making those friends on the team, and some guys have gone on to do some great things. And I was in New Jersey last weekend with a buddy from the college golf team, right? So I had one great coach that was super inspirational. So great memories. But man, when you're trying to sleep in your dorm room bed and you got to play Yale at like 7 a.m. the next day, and you got guys partying until 4 o'clock in the morning, like it's not conducive to great golf.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, like played in college technically, good experience. And then after, because the only job I ever had in my entire life was a golf course job, like from 15, cleaning carts, scrubbing clubs, learning the important things in life, like the guy that tips the best, you keep the clubs, near the front
Right.
of the storage. And then I went down to Florida and worked at a high end private course. Awesome experience to see that world. Caddied out in Colorado for a season, and then kind of saw the future. And I ended up pulling the plug on golf as a career around that. And the Sox were making a run towards the World Series, so I had to leave Colorado to get back to watch it in '04.
Of course, like a true New Englander. But let's double take on college golf for a second, because you brought up Yale, and I know you're a big golf course architecture person. I imagine you played the Yale golf course a number of times. Correct me if I'm wrong. But tell me a little bit about that course, because that's all. I've had some other folks on the pod who've brought up the Yale course. It's under renovation right now, and it's always kind of been this like hidden, not so hidden gem in the Northeast. It got a little raggedy. Now they're doing the big renovation, like I said. But tell me a little bit about your experience playing over there.
Yeah, so I went to Quinnipiac, which is next door to New Haven, and Yale hosted a spring and a fall tournament. So we played it quite a bit. This is pre Pro V. This is like maybe Titanium was just out. The course is a beast. I think if we get into like architecture and everything else, one of the transitions that you make is when you're trying to compete, it's all about score, right? Like that
Right.
was, if I didn't play well, I might not be able to play in the next tournament. So when you hear PGA Tour players talk about fairness and everything else, like I don't like it now, but I get where they're coming from because there's so much on the line. Fully transparent, in college, playing in 38-degree weather, I hated Yale. There's blind shots. Like I would hit it down and then you couldn't find your ball. And I was like, this is crazy. Like then I appreciate it for certain aspects. Now, like later in life and soon after college, golf took on a different meaning for me and how much I appreciate architecture. It is a very special, incredible place. It's insane that Yale has the endowment that they do and they let it get to that place. But it's awesome. And if the public is going to be able to see it going forward, it's a must see. It is dramatic. It's bold. There's really nothing else like it, especially if you like the Rayner McDonald styling. It's a pretty special place, but it's not when you're trying to post a low score in the raw weather of spring, and we literally we got snowed out. Like the ball was picking up on the putting green, was picking up snow, and I mean it was
Wow.
crazy. We would be out there. You can talk to other guys that have done that. Like we're all traumatized by it. It used to be 6+ hour rounds. So they used to do 36
Wow.
holes one day, and we were literally out there for like 12, 13 hours. They just handed us like lunch, like keep playing, keep going. I mean,
Wow.
it was, it was brutal at that time. And I shot a million one year. It's honestly like I'm scarred for life, but it's a very cool place, and I can't wait to see what Gil does with it
Yeah.
and to see it again
100%.
with a new appreciation.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it. I didn't really think about it like that because, to your point, I mean, I've never been down there to play, but I've heard it is obviously a pretty challenging golf course. And when you are, in college trying to compete, you probably don't want to continuously be going to a place that's going to beat you around.
Yeah, and with Rayner, the misses, instead of maybe instead of like a half shot penalty when you miss a green, with those greens and the severe drop offs and these dramatic fall offs into deep bunkers, I mean it's a shot penalty like every time. So you have to be,
Right.
which is very fun, but not when you need to put the ball in the hole on all the time. So yeah, it's super special. It's one of New England's gems, and I'm I'm very looking back on. I'm very happy I got to play as many times as I did, but it was painful at the time.
I hear you. So did the competitive career end once you left school? Did you try and play in any, amateur events once you left, or what did that look like?
Again, because I didn't know anything other than golf. Graduated college, had a degree, but I'm like, I just know how to work at golf courses. So there was literally a flyer about working at this course down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Um, did it, got on the outside operations, had 2 awesome years down there. So that's really the key point is you have a dream maybe at one point. Well, if I practice all winter, maybe I can get better. Then you go see what real talent is. And you're like, yep, all right, I'm good. Um,
Right.
there was guys. It was awesome. I mean, it was awesome. It was some of the best memories. Right, I was there for 2 years, and I still have so many good memories of. I mean, scrubbing clubs, parking carts, but just meeting members that have been successful. That's one of the great things about golf is it opens opportunities to see the world, and it doesn't have to be
Right.
about playing. And same thing with caddying in Colorado. I got to caddy for a lot of really cool people, and some don't give a crap about you. Some remember your name, and you're like, wow, that was really cool. Like Archie Manning was super nice, like incredibly nice. Like, Jed, what should we do here? And I just will always remember that, right? I was nothing but just, um, and that's part of the beauty of golf. It presented an opportunity and have a lot of great memories from that.
That's awesome. So then let's switch topics a little bit and transfer now to, you know, how your golf passion is kind of manifesting itself now with what you're doing with Poor Man's Golf Guide. So that's how I found you. And in your bio, it's an interesting one. It says head historian at Plymouth Country Club. What does that mean? I've been very curious.
Well, I think I think to lead into that. So after the Colorado stuff, I ended up hating golf and stopped playing for 2 years. So this is part of my identity. It's something I never did. But then for 2 years, I did not play a round of golf.
Right.
And and then things changed. My parents were trying to do a family trip, and we were going to go to Scotland to play a couple of years later. Anyway, so I was like, well, if we're going to go to Scotland, I should probably try playing golf again, like before I go. Long story short, as a kid, I always loved golf course architecture. Like I remember career day emailing architects. I wish I could remember who wrote back, but he was basically like, don't do it. It's the worst profession. You're gonna have to go like live. I wish I still had it, but we're talking 90s. Anyways, so I knew it was always a passion of me. When I went to Scotland and you see links golf and you see just the way the community builds around it, the style of golf, how much fun it is. Don't worry about score. Score was always so important. Then you go over, and the game took on a different meaning from there, and then kind of exploded a different type of passion. That's the thing about golf, the tentacles of the game. You can be into so many different things, right? And I thought it was always about scoring and playing. How good of a golfer are you? But man, there's so many different things and avenues that you can get into. And then I came back when I lived in Boston. I mean, totally had my first job at Reebok was $30,000 per year. Again, that's a while ago, but you can't buy a lot of greens fees when you're pulling in 30,000. But that's also where we live. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things messed up with Boston. Traffic's terrible. Cost of living is awful. Public transportation is brutal. But we do have access to a lot of great golden age golf courses. But I mean, I can't speak to everywhere, but there's a lot that you can go and see for cheap money. And I fell in love with Ponkapog because I was at Reebok and this is across the way. And I think it was like $15 or something. Ponkapog, Donald Ross. That kept my connection with the game because of that. If I didn't have Ponkapog, and then everyone was like, this is a piece of crap, but there's no grass. I loved it. You could roll your ball over and find a little tuft of grass, but the greens are still there. Who cares if there's footprints in the bunkers? You flip it open. I mean, the fun of playing golf is all still there. And part of it is because of the architecture. I mean, I came out of retirement. I made the Mass Am and we played at the country club. And I just loved being like, they announced my name from Ponkapog at the country club in Brookline. And that comparison, I was like, this is so cool. Anyways, life goes on. And then I love Donald Ross golf courses. I knew about Plymouth Country Club, had never played it. It's a pretty cool story, but this is the way the world works. I left Old Marsh in Florida. I still had friends.
Right.
There was a guy that came right after me. So I would go back down, mutual friends, all this stuff. He goes on, stays in the golf business. I'm talking to him one day about golf, and he's like, hey, Plymouth Country Club has an awesome deal. It's $500. You can play from the spring until Memorial Day. I'm like, man, I live in Boston. Like that's really far. And I was like, well, maybe yeah. I mean, this is way back. This is 2016. I was like, all right, well, I dreamed to say I joined a private club for, 2 months, but at least I can say I can do it. I can play this Donald Ross golf course. It'll be great. Long story short, that's Mike Roy, who's now the director of golf operations at Plymouth. Like, it's all serendipitous how this all happened. He grew up playing at Plymouth. Right. He mentioned it to me. I joined a couple of years later. He comes in, and it's just been this special place for me ever since. When I joined, part of that is, this deal is because they needed members. I don't know why I started digging into the history. Maybe it was just because of the golf course and Donald Ross, but I started doing this research and found these nuggets of information that some people knew, some people didn't. And I was like, this is more than just another golf course. There's some cool stuff going on. And I was reaching out to people to acquire more information. The whole historian part came over is not because I thought I knew the most or anything else, but I just wanted to be a central repository where if people had information, they knew where to provide it, right? There was a lot of history
Right.
lost that people weren't paying attention to. And I was like, this is really cool. So like, let me just curate it. Let me just hold on to it. Let me tell the story when I need to. But the biggest thing is I wanted to build pride among the membership and also be an
Right.
outlet for me to freak out about golf history and everything else. But I wanted to say a few things so people feel really proud about the place that they get to play all the time, right?
Right.
And I think that just creates a passion and it grows organically. It's just a small way of being able to help with that. Also, like just because I do a lot of other research, it carries a little bit of weight if I can say to other people, I'm the historian at Plymouth Country Club, researching either your course or various things. Like I've gone to museums in Washington, D.C. and these different things. So if I can literally frame it as the historian of Plymouth Country Club and working with Don Ross Museum and stuff, it helps a little bit. But the big thing is I just wanted to help protect the history that I was finding. And I was 30 something when I did it. I was pretty young for the historian role, but I hope when I'm 80, there's another guy out there like me that I can pass all this on to.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do a lot of older country clubs they generally have someone in that position? I've just like never heard of it, so I'm very curious.
Yeah, so the big clubs do. A lot of them do, but a lot of that is like they've always had the history and they're just preserving it.
Right.
I think mine was a little different because I have to search and find a lot of it. So I didn't really realize I had this much passion for history and everything else, but it's like finding treasure. It's like the Goonies when
Yeah.
you're going through and you find something and you're like, wow, this is awesome. And then you tell someone else, they're like, this, I don't care. And you're like, well, whatever.
Well, while we have you on here, let's do a quick Plymouth Country Club history lesson. Share
Well,
some of your favorite
yeah.
nuggets about the club.
Well, I was just going to say too, like, so I joined the Donald Ross Society, which helped quite a bit, and credit to my awesome girlfriend who gave it as a Christmas gift years ago. And I was like, that might be the best gift I've ever gotten. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I travel to Philadelphia and I go to this historian event. Didn't know anyone, like literally went down by myself. And I walk in and I'm probably the youngest by 20 something years. And they start talking and I'm like, oh my God, I found my people. Like I found my people. Like what they were talking about were all little things that I was doing on my own. So when you're talking about where other clubs doing this, not a lot of them are, but those that are, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like we're going through the same battle together, which
Right.
was awesome. I mean, Plymouth Country Club in general, there's so much. Noah, there's so much. The biggest thing is Ross did 400 golf courses ish, right? I think any golf course that can claim Donald Ross designed holes, Donald Ross designed greens should embrace that as much as possible. Part of it is just knowing your identity as a club, what makes you special, and being able to talk about that. For Plymouth, one of the coolest things that I found is that Henry Hornblower was a founding member. He gave the land for the golf course to be built. He had been down in Pinehurst and he loved golf and he wanted golf in his backyard to be able to do it. And it's a long story, but he was legitimately close friends with Donald Ross, even to the point when
Right.
Hornblower died. He died. He played all the articles. Hornblower was a big financial guy. When he died, newspapers across the country ran about his death. All the articles say he played 9 holes with his friend Donald Ross that morning. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
Oh wow.
The way thing works, you meet one person, they hear you have a passion. I meet this guy. He's doing his own research. He finds Donald Ross's, when he passed away, he found his stock portfolio. All the stocks, it's managed by Hornblower and Weeks. So he was his financial advisor. He was his stock guy. And I had heard that, like, okay, yeah, sure. But like literally, and then I played Secondment in Rhode Island, and just on a whim, I bought their history book because I wanted to read through it. And there's this piece about his granddaughter talking about memories that she had going through his journal and his letters. And it says, it seems like he went to go play Plymouth a lot. Like that's her breakdown of like, so 400 golf courses. Even with Ross just being on site, I think is unique and special, but you have a real connection between a close friend, someone that managed his money. You have family letters talking about how much time he spent there. So there's a lot of cool stuff about just Plymouth in general and some of the other founding members and what they contributed to Boston history and everything else. But yeah, I think there's a special connection there that's worth a little extra meaning.
Right. And so obviously Ross did, like you said, 400 courses. A bunch of those are here around the Northeast. Do you know what percentage of those like he actually set foot on? Because I know a lot of times like he would just get sent like a topo map, draw the holes and things like that.
No, good call. And it depends on who you ask. And that's one of the things about history and also golf architecture is like as soon as you think you know something, you'll come across something else that changes it, right? Like in the Secondment book that I just read, it talks about like 40% and he never stepped foot on. But then you'll see other things where they're like, no, he was usually at least walked the land or something. So
got it.
But what you mentioned is correct. Like a lot of that he did, and that was always the story that I always knew too, is he would be on the train, he'd have the topo map, he would draw the routing, make some field notes, and then ship it back off to the golf course. We're talking about trains, right? To get across the country. So he was a very busy guy, but it would have been really hard to put that much personal touch into all these golf courses.
Right.
And that's where I think some of the aspect. Yeah, I mean, he's buried in Newton. You can go see his grave. It's pretty cool.
He is. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow, I might have to make a pilgrimage to that.
It is. It's pretty. Not that I know a lot about like graveyards, but it's a beautiful setting, and it's really cool to see him there. Pinehurst. Everyone associates Pinehurst, Donald Ross, and that's where he would spend his winters and everything else. But Massachusetts, I mean, he landed here when he needed a place to rest. He chose here and stuff. So I think he built. Yeah, I mean, it can go down. I think he built an indoor, an indoor miniature golf course in Newton too, which is
really
something people don't talk about. Yeah, you start digging into these newspaper articles, you find a bunch of different stuff. But
so is that where you are finding most of these little nuggets, just like chasing down old newspapers and books and things like that? I imagine you're probably not Googling, right? Like you're probably doing a lot of this like manually going to certain museums that might have things on file.
It's all the above, honestly. What's tough now is I think I have exhausted a lot of the online options.
Okay.
Every once in a while, a new newspaper will pop up. You always find something, but now it's like trying to track down family members. So it's weird. I think because of the close association with the Hornblower and Ross, like a lot of our photos and drawings and maps that all these other courses have, we don't. And I think for some reason, I feel like that negative is actually a positive because someone has it somewhere, some family somewhere. So, and I should go back to that's where the historian thing helps, where I reach out to this like granddaughter, right? like, why is this person doing it? But if you can say, I've done all this research, historian at Plymouth Country Club, I understand this, people understand that this is more than just someone poking around, right? So,
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to go back to your point earlier about like, Donald Ross hopping on a train and traveling everywhere to build these golf courses. I was just editing the pod that's going to go live tomorrow, and we had this exact same conversation. Like, how did he have time to do all of this? Because the guest I had on is from Minnesota, and we're talking about one of the
yeah,
courses he did out there in like the mid
White Bear.
20s, and I'm like, wasn't he supposed to be down in Pinehurst at that point, or like doing something else?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. He wrote so many letters and journals that the guys that are really into it, they can almost, you can say a month or a day, and they almost know where he was. If you look at all the
Really?
maps, you'll see courses start to get clustered together. So like he would go out to Minnesota and go to a few different places. Michigan, same type of thing. There's usually like a guy that he knew from Pinehurst that was well off, or and then
They
he
would like
lived in a
recruit
certain
him to come do a
region. He would
course.
go out, they would bring him out, he would knock out some courses. There's usually some connection, some way of why he ended up in some of these places. And some people just paid him a lot of money, and he'd be like, "I'm not coming out there." They're like, "We'll pay." Okay, all right, to help. They'll figure out how to
Right.
go.
That's
Yeah.
really cool, man. Well, on the topic of Donald Ross, and I didn't send you this question beforehand, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jed. But if you could do, since you're clearly I don't know if expert, but close to an expert on Donald Ross, you're clearly very familiar with his work. If you had to do like a Mount Rushmore of Donald Ross courses, or we'll say like a top five your favorite Ross courses, what would you go with? You don't have to do it in any particular
Yeah.
order, and it can be ones you've played or not. We'll say that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't have a good answer for it. What I would say is his variety changed so much over the years. And this is something when you get into it deeper, you realize, right? Everyone thinks it's grass face bunkers, and that was his style, but his style evolved a lot over time. And when I was younger, I just assumed like he kind of had the same methodology. Well, early Ross is a lot different than like then he was really cooking in the 1920s, and things get bolder, technology's changing. You're going to see courses with more bunkers, more dramatic stuff. He goes later, Great Depression, things become simpler. And so it's almost, I'm going off topic here, but one of the things that I love doing is if I get to play a new golf course of any kind that has some historical significance, I obviously look who's posted as the architect, but I try to do no other research
Right.
going into it. And then I like to play it. And this is where this helps with golf so much because who cares about score? You got a game within the game. You play the round, and I try to like figure out, well, this green's not like the other greens. Or, I had to walk pretty far from one green to a tee, and usually they're pretty close, right? So then I try to make some notes, like what do I think changed over time? And then you can go back into aerials and look and like quiz yourself to see where changes were, right?
Yeah.
And it's like not to go back to Sakana, but it was like 1898 on the sign. I'm like, well, Ross didn't land until 1899. I know that the golf course, it's not Ross worked with something that was already there, right? So it's not like he had full realm of the land. And I think that's what's fascinating to me is putting it all together in the different pieces. So it's tough to pick a top five because there's like different eras and everything
Right.
else. I mean, I think Essex is in our Essex here is incredible. And that's kind of early Ross. There's some really funky stuff there. That's really cool. And they do an awesome job presenting their golf course in a way where it feels old and historic, but obviously perfect at the same time, right?
Right.
And then you go to Wannamoisett, which is another fantastic Ross golf course, but that feels like brand new, and it kind of is because Andrew Green liked it. But they go neon green, wall to wall, and it's both Ross. The greens are awesome at both, but it's all at the same time. It's different and different styles, and it's presented differently. So, I mean, almost no one cares about this stuff, but I find it fascinating to dive into. Golf will always get you, right? Like it will always kick you in the balls at some point. But if you can have a separate outlet where you can enjoy it regardless, right? It gives you a little bit of like protection from that nut shot, because you're going to be like, well, at least I still got to study these greens, and there's 15 Ross original greens. So it's a different approach. But I honestly, I love it all. I mean, George Wright, Franklin Park, I think we're super lucky to have that. I mean, you can play this stuff for cheap. What was it, $55 to play Franklin Park? Something like that. It's awesome.
Yeah, 45 during the week if you can make it out on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
I was joking about all the stuff that's wrong with Boston. When I saved that $5 being a Boston resident when I check in at George Wright or Franklin Park,
It feels good.
it does feel good.
I
It
think
feels
mainly
really
because
good.
it gets you under $50, and something about like paying something in the 40s for especially a course like that always feels good.
And I love both of those places, and that's a perfect example where both Ross, but they're two different playing experiences.
Completely different.
I mean, Franklin Park. I say this to the guys a lot, but like George Wright is awesome, fantastic. But I feel like there's other golf courses like George Wright. Franklin Park, I feel, is a more unique experience where it's open. You can see multiple holes. It feels linksy,
Yeah.
and you don't get that experience very much, and it's pretty awesome. We do that, we play both courses every year on the same day, and it's something I look forward to every year to be able to do it. It's great.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do 36 of Franklin Park and George Wright. It's definitely on my bucket list to play them both in the same day. And I think you hit the nail on the head about them both obviously being Ross, but they're both so different. And Franklin Park, like most people probably tell you George Wright's the better golf course, but I just have like such a sweet spot for
Yeah.
Franklin Park because it's kind of where I learned to golf, to be honest. Like when we were in like 8th grade or early high school, like they had a really good junior rate. Like you could just go out, pay $10, see how many holes you could get in. Parents just pick you up in 2-3 hours, whatever it was. And also like that's where I go to practice now. Like it's really hard to practice golf in the city of Boston. Like you said earlier, traffic's crazy. I'm not really a range nut. Like I kind of stopped going to the range, and if you're trying to chip and putt, there's not really a lot of places to do that. And Franklin Park's a relatively simple drive for me, so like pretty much my practice routine, like it's like 3 days a week. I just head over to Franklin Park sometime around sunset, chip and putt for around an hour, and then I just play those first, what is it, 1 through 5, 1 through 4, that first little loop, and it's like I've gotten significantly better at golf just doing that, and you have a lot of other people there all trying to do that. Like there's this great like practice culture there where everyone is kind of there trying to work on their game in many ways.
I love that, and I love hearing it. So how long does it take you to get to Franklin Park when you go and do that?
If I time it right, it 25 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, but traffic maybe closer to 30, 35.
Yeah, and I obviously care deeply about Plymouth, and I love it. And it's so far though, so that practice thing that you're talking about, that doesn't exist. Like
Right.
I just don't have that option. Yeah, and it's tough in the city. I mean, we have like a little deck that I like swing a golf club on. That's why I'm a 4 handicap now. I don't have time to practice. So
Right.
hearing that and having that access, and I'm with. I don't know why something about Franklin Park is like you just feel like you're somewhere special too. I mean, it's the whole park
And the
in general
land,
too.
like you show up and it doesn't feel like you're in Boston.
Boston.
Like
Yeah.
there's something about, I don't know if Franklin Park has its own little like microclimate, but it's always windier. It's like the weather at Franklin Park is never the same as it is 10 minutes away. And I don't know, to your point, like on the weekend there's parties bumping all around. It's like just the whole vibe is just it's like it's a scene. Like you really have to experience it. And it's so drastically different than what you'll get at George Wright.
Yeah,
In a
and the
good way.
guys, yeah, and the guys think I'm crazy, but I this I get like Augusta National vibes when I'm there.
Dude,
In
I
the
get
sense,
Shinnecock.
well, you know what? It is Shinnecock. Like I literally have said that
Especially when the
before,
fescue is
especially
up.
and the links like working through the mounds. I mean, that's probably a better take. But when you approach, if you go to Augusta, you're sitting up high, and then it's like nothing else exists. Like the horizon line, it drops down, and then the trees, and you don't see anything else. This well, also at Augusta, Washington Road, it's like Route One, and then you go into this utopia, right?
Right.
When you go to Franklin Park, you're driving through the city, and then you get there, and you're kind of sitting up high, and then everything, out towards like 17, 16, it drops down, and you can see for a while, and then, that's that low point. I think the Bobby Jones hole is like 8 at Augusta. I think that's the par 5 that goes up. I just think the same. I don't know. It's just a special place. You can get Shinnecock vibes. Augusta's a stretch, but it's just there's something there that is really special.
I'm with you, dude. Like it definitely feels more regal than it than it really is in many ways. And I think too, what's really cool is like people think, when you compare the two, everyone's like, oh, Franklin Park's so easy. Like, let's go to George Wright. Franklin Park, I will die on this hill, is not an easy golf course. It's like short by today's standards. Like I think it tips out maybe at 62, if that. But there is just so much subtle movement on those greens where if you don't play there regularly, like your putting's gonna suffer. The like you're hitting to an elevated green on like I think maybe 6 or 7 holes, something like that. And it's just like you really got to figure out like where to pick your poison around there, working it around. Like it's really going to make you think, and like the length is very deceiving around there. And when you combine the length and with how open it appears, it's very deceiving. But it's a hard golf course.
Yeah, I agree. It's a blast because you got space to work the ball, but you still got to try to get the ball in the hole. So
Totally.
it's a great spot.
Well, Jed, why don't you tell me then, since we've talked so much about golf courses, just your favorite golf course that you've favorite golf course you've ever played. It can be something you play regularly or that you played one time on a trip or something like that.
Yeah, so if you go on it's funny you said Shinnecock. I think that's the best course that I've ever played or ever seen. But I think there's a high sentimental value to what's your favorite golf course, right? So when we're sitting around the bar, it's almost like, what golf course would you want to play if you got one more round? Right? What are you doing? There's a place up in Keene, New Hampshire called Brentwood. It's 36
Okay.
holes. They have an incredible. It's a Jeffrey Cornish. It's not Golden Age, but there's a level of wholesomeness. It's family owned. I think it's like $70. You can play both courses. And I grew up working there, and it's just a very special place. It's back, obviously in New Hampshire where I grew up, and my dad still plays there. There's the best of the best, but if it's not going to be Plymouth, I would go home and play Brentwood.
Anything on the bucket list that you're looking forward to playing? I'm sure everybody's got crazy courses in their mind, but is there anything that is on your radar coming up shortly?
Oh, man, there's a million. Sankaty always comes to mind. That's something that I haven't seen. There's still a couple. There's a lot out west in Western Mass that I would like to see. Glen Falls is a Ross out in New York that I'm pretty intrigued to see. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, man. It's fascinating because the biggest and the best and the fanciest isn't always it. I get uncomfortable. Like I've written about this in the past, but if you like when I pull up and I don't know, is there a valet? Like
It's the worst. It really is the worst. Can I wear a hat in the clubhouse? Like you're scared to ask where the bathroom is. Like, and so I got an invite out to Dedham Country and Polo, and I don't want to slander. I don't know if you know anyone at Dedham, so I want to be careful what I say. But like, I just like
yeah.
I played there, and I just did not feel welcome at all. It probably didn't help that we were like unaccompanied guests, but it was just like it did not feel great pulling up there and leaving.
It's true. And like sometimes you can pay for stuff in the pro shop, sometimes you can. It goes on the member thing, right? So
Right.
I mean, I just love um, level of comfortability too when I talk about golf courses. I will say, I know we were hinting at like lost golf courses. All the courses that I could see, it doesn't exist anymore. But I really do want. It was called Misery Island Club.
Okay, tell me about that.
It was off the coast of Beverly, Mass. It was literally called Misery Island Club. It opened up in like 1900, and it was a private club for wealthy Bostonians to find liberty and privacy. It's like, I don't know. Remember Baker's Bay? Like, I think that's where Jordan Spieth, like, and Justin Thomas played with their
Yeah.
shirts off and stuff. I mean, they literally talk about there was no dress code. It was 9 holes. They talk about the greens being so close to the ocean that like you hit a long, it goes into the cliffs. So these guys would take their private yacht or take their boats. There was a place called Cocktail Cove where you'd pull up and like booze.
What year are we talking about?
1900 to there was like till 1926, I think it existed.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was only like 2,600 yards, so it was super short. But they had tennis, they had swimming and boating and all this stuff. But it was for like these wealthy Bostonians to like get away from everything. It's like if you want, there's a part where there's an article where like Harvard alum rent out the island, and they're like, we want to prove that we can still paint the town red. It's right off of Beverly. You can actually go to it now. It's open to the public, but they would just go. I'm assuming some stuff went down
Right.
on this island, and then it was a big deal. And then they financial trouble. They put a casino out there, so you could go. Yeah, I mean, we're talking casinos and like people just want to get away. I don't know. It's like a Diddy party out there. That's what it sounds like. The way, the way you read about it, and then a fire, like a mysterious fire, burned it all
Classic.
down. And there was cottages. There was like this old clubhouse and cottages and all this stuff. And then it burned down, and then it just never really was the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, for like 20 years, there was a 9-hole course off an island of Beverly that was ultra exclusive. And
Wow.
I wrote and I joked about it. Like if I don't know, there's a lot that I'd love to go back and see what Plymouth was, but man, if Doc Brown and his DeLorean comes, I might tell him to send me to Misery Island Club.
Whenever people ask me like superpower, every single time I'm like time travel. Time travel every single time. And part of it now emerging is the golf factor for things like this. What is it? Misery Island, right? Is what you said it was
Yeah,
called. I would love to go back, hang out with Donald Ross, just watch him
yeah.
like build some of these golf courses. Like, and it's so impressive. Like I just played out at I assume you've played Wachusett. I just played out there for the first time. And like, how did they build golf courses on land like that in the 1910s or 1920s? It's just like unbelievable to think about how they were moving that land.
There's a cool video on YouTube that it's some of the best footage I've ever seen. It's when when Ross was building a Ronamink in Philly, and you can I mean, it's film. It's not just photos, and you can
Right.
see them with like the ox and plow, like digging up the dirt, and it's amazing, and
Unbelievable.
like trying to blow up these stumps. Yeah, it's amazing, and to think that they created golf that is arguably more fun to play than many courses later. Yeah, it's amazing.
So before we wrap up, I do want you to tell us the story of Allston Golf Club, because that's how I found you in the first place. I think was I saw your Instagram post about that, and that rung true for me because I practically grew up on Com Ave, and to think there was a golf course there is just mind blowing to me. So tell us a little bit about Allston Golf Club.
Yeah, no, thanks, and I'm glad that resonated with you. It's one of those things again where I'm like doing all this research. I think it's cool, but then you send it out to the world, and like you don't know if it resonates with other people. And
Right.
maybe it resonates more with us because we live in Boston. But that was 1890s, so there's a definitive era in golf, like when golf's getting popular. A lot of that 1890s, early 1900s, very short golf courses, right? Like golf in its infancy in America, but there was a shift from wealthy bus, and then the subway comes into effect in the late 1890s too. But there's this shift from wealth used to be in like Beacon Hill. Um, and then they wanted to go out to the suburbs, to those pastoral, that whole 5 miles or whatever it is, but that was all undeveloped, right? And along with that, golf courses were popping up everywhere. Man, there was five, I think, just in Chestnut Hill. It was like 12
Wow.
maybe just within like Newton. I mean, there's still quite a few there, but I originally there's a course called Chestnut Hill, which I found some Plymouth members interested in. I was digging that, and then Allston Golf Club. These are the holes you fall into. Yeah, so there was a golf course called Allston Golf Club. It was 9 holes. It was right off of Com Ave. So for those of us that know it, the MBTA, which is a hunk of junk, runs directly past it. So it was extremely popular at that time. I mean, there's articles that talk about it was more popular than Franklin Park because it was easier to get to. Guys
Where
could be
was it
working.
on Com Ave?
It is right where BU Stadium is. Not to kill the punchline, it is right. It is right there. So
No way.
it was popular because of its location. So people could just hop on the train. Think about that. It's like what we were talking about with Franklin Park to be able to practice, right? So it was one of the most convenient locations for people to play golf. And then it was popular that when you talk, I was trying to find stuff about the golf course. There was a big pond. That was their big selling point. There was a big pond, and you could either. It talks about like, oh, it's a big, the famous pond hole. You could either try to hit it over the pond, or if you wanted to play it safe, you played it through an apple orchard, like around the pond through an apple orchard. It was owned by this express company. I was like, what's an express company? It's like Pony Express. So there was horses on the golf course that were considered movable objects. So like you'd play through apple orchards and around horses to play this golf
Wow.
course. Anyways, so then it was obviously very popular, but part of it's the urban sprawls coming out, right? So that land becomes even more valuable, more so than just for golf. So I'm trying to think of it was like 1912, I think they sold the golf course, and who'd they sell it to? They sold it to the owner of the Boston Braves. So that's when Boston had two baseball teams, the
Right.
Boston Red Sox and the Boston Braves. And they built Braves Stadium on the golf course, which is funny because where'd that pond go? That famous pond is gone. That wouldn't fly today in today's. They obviously filled that bad boy in. Um, and then they created Braves Field. And at the time, it was the largest baseball stadium in the country. So at first I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I just kept going and learning about it. But Braves Field seemed like they played the World Series at Braves Field instead of Fenway because it had higher capacity. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. Babe Ruth played his final season for the Boston Braves. So he played there. And then they become the Milwaukee Braves. So the Braves move out of town, and then BU, who now owns the stadium, it's known as Nickerson Field,
Yeah.
is there. But I mean, the Boston Patriots uh, played there for I think for 2 seasons in that stadium. So it's this little plot of land with this little golf course, which in itself maybe a lot of golf courses disappear. But what that became between Braves Field and the history there, and then I think BU, and where I kind of got goosebumps when I was doing it is I decided to go and like check it out for myself. And I didn't. It's Braves Field is a road there. The ticket office is now the BU police station, and I like
No
took a
way.
picture, and like sure enough, I mean it's the exact same building.
Wow.
And then the right field grandstands are still there. So there's still some parts of the original Braves Field that are still there as part of Nickerson Field.
I mean the you're talking about the police station. The other side of that, the other through street is Babcock Street, and that's the street I grew up on the Brookline side. So
Dude,
I
you like
literally
grew up
grew
on the
up.
golf course. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up right down the road from there. That's really cool, man.
Think of how good you'd be. You wouldn't have to drive to Franklin Park. You could have been practicing right there the whole time.
I know. Seriously, who knows where I'd be right now? Certainly, maybe I wouldn't be hosting a podcast. Maybe I'd be out on the mini
Well,
tour right now.
this is talking about that. How about in my hometown of Peterborough, which I found a cool story about a golf course. There was a Donald Ross golf course. I had no idea.
Really?
It got,
And
I
it's
think the
not there anymore.
38 hurricane flooded it. But I would have to drive 40 minutes to play golf as a kid. Meanwhile,
Wow.
now all these years later, I love Donald Ross, and there was one 10 minutes away that, I missed it by 60 years, but it's fine.
Yeah, man. Well, Jed, this was a blast, dude. I
Yeah.
know it's late. I don't want to take up too much of your time, man. It seems like you have endless stories we could go through. We might have to rattle off a part two at some point to get into more of this. But I think what you said about like, you know, playing golf with like a different goal on top of your score is really interesting. Like going out there and just having something else that you're paying attention to, whether it be the architecture or I don't know, like getting really into trees or the wildlife, something like that. I think I've started to do that a little bit just as I've gotten a little bit more into the architecture side of things. And I think it makes me play better, just to your point earlier. Like if I hit a bad shot, it doesn't bother me quite as much because it's not the only thing I'm out there to think about.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of crossover there with skiing a little bit too, where it's like when you go out skiing with your buddies, you're not focused on your time for the most part,
Right.
right? Like you're picking your line, you're avoiding obstacles or moguls or icy spots, and you're just going down and enjoying making the turns and that thrill of doing it. And unless you break your leg, like how many bad days do you have skiing, right? Like you're
Right.
out there, you're outside with your friends, you're in the lodge, it's like the 19th hole. And I think there's an aspect of that helped me love the game even more, is to appreciate the sense of place and everything. Now that being said, there's people that just like, I play with people that are like, I'm putting the ball in the hole, whatever my score is my score.
Right.
And there's the golf's open for all that. But yeah, I think that can be helpful if you just kind of take it all in.
The last question I got for you, Jed, the last question I ask everybody who comes on the show: why do you love golf? I know we've probably hit on bits and
Yeah.
pieces of it during our conversation, but why do you love golf, man? Why is it such a big part of your life?
Yeah. I mean, I knew it was coming. I'm still just, I think because it hits so many different types. Like and that's not even for me. I think why golf is so powerful is that it doesn't matter if you're into analytics or the arts. You can be a club shaft guy. You can geek out on that stuff. You can be a swing guy. But golf just has this way of sinking its claws into it. Right. Today, I would say it's an ability to connect with my friends is the most important thing. Right. Like like, what did we talk? We talked for an hour. Just like, my favorite thing is when I have my buddies and you're playing golf and you're outside. And I mean, I'm 44. There's not a lot of other opportunities in life to have that time, right? It's the same. It's like everything I talked to my dad about. 90% of it is golf. I was looking. All my text messages are like people golf, somehow golf related, right? So it's just this thing that keeps friendships alive, and it obviously means a lot to all of us.
Well, Jed, thank you so much for coming on the show. One more time, if folks are interested in some of your content about the history side of the sport, where can they find you on Instagram? What's the handle?
So it's called Poor Man's Golf Guide, which doesn't make much sense at all because it is slightly misleading unless you've been following for a long time. I would also say, like, it's funny that we're actually talking about it because I never like promote Poor Man's Golf Guide. It is a creative outlet where like, I mean, I've been doing it. I think I started in like 2015. I mean, I still almost have no followers, but it's about like just throwing it out there. So the fact that you saw something on Allston Golf Club and liked it, that's awesome, right? Because usually it just goes out into the abyss and nothing about it. But it's just try to share a little bit more of a unique perspective on golf. Poor man's golf. Poor man's like phrasing it's a comparative phrase in general, right? You're comparing two different things. And in the beginning, I wanted to provide people an opportunity, like, all right, Franklin Park, poor man's Shinnecock, like that type of thing. Like,
Right.
how do you recommend experiences that are similar, right? And like, so it was about taking advantage of the discount rate at Sandy Burr and all that stuff, and then it's evolved into all this. But at the core, still a lot of metaphors. Still a lot of comparing to restaurants, to dating, all that important stuff crosses over with golf. So yeah, follow if you want. If you don't get it, totally understand. But that's where I throw up photos and talk about stuff. So
Awesome,
I
man.
appreciate it, man. Thanks, Noah.
Yeah,
Let's tee it up before the snow falls.
100%, man. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a good one.